Hiro Nakamura. Hiro Nakamura, Jean Kungguang/Hiro Nakamura. Nakamura Hiro is a fictional superhero on the NBC superhero drama Heroes who possesses the ability of space-time manipulation. This means that Hiro is able to alter the flow of time, teleport, and time travel. In the show, he is played by Japanese-American actor Masi Oka. According to the online comic on NBC.com, Hiro is named after Hiroshima, so that his family will always remember the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Tim Kring has been quoted as saying, "It's no coincidence we named him Hiro. He truly is on a hero's quest." To this end, his name is often used as a pun. His co-worker and best friend Ando once called him Super-Hiro in jest. Character development. Hiro was one of the last main characters to be created by Tim Kring. He was added to the pilot episode after Kring's wife noticed none of the existing main characters were happy about their powers. During a panel session, Kring explained that he developed Hiro as a comic book geek trapped in a life that was kind of not of his making. Thus, viewers were introduced to Hiro as an office worker in a sea of cubicles. In an interview, Tim Kring noted, "I didn't start off by saying I want a guy who can teleport. I started off by saying I wanted a guy who felt trapped in a life that was not his dream and what could be a power that would be most wish-fulfilling for that character. And that was the ability to teleport out of that life." Fictional character synopsis. Hiro Nakamura is an office worker, specifically a Level-3 programmer at Yamamoto Industries living in Tokyo, Japan, who one day discovers he has the power to bend to time and space. An otaku, Hiro is an avid fan of superheroes and science fiction. Naive and overeager, Hiro is the one character that aspires to the pure heroism of comic book crime fighters, shouldering the responsibility to use his powers for good. His best friend is the skeptical Ando Masahashi. At the start, Hiro is only able to speak Japanese, relying on Ando as his translator. But as the series progresses, his English slowly develops. Hiro's blog, maintained by NBC and written from Hiro's point of view, was updated after each new episode aired, usually about the events of the episode. Genesis. At the start of the series, Hiro's power is developed enough for him to turn the second hand of his clock back 1 second. It is later discovered that this same power made a train 14 seconds late. Ecstatic at these accomplishments, Hiro confides in his friend, Ando, who is extremely skeptical of Hiro's new abilities. At Ando's suggestion, Hiro teleports himself into the women's bathroom of a local club, though Ando is not looking at the time. Seeing Hiro dragged out of the bathroom, Ando states that this only proves that he is a pervert, and a crestfallen Hiro walks away as Ando yells sarcastically that he is a super-Hiro. As Hiro returns home on the train, he sees a vacation ad for New York City. At this point, Hiro's power inadvertently activates, teleporting him to Times Square. Hiro appears extremely happy to have successfully used his ability. He soon discovers a comic book called Ninth Wonders in a nearby newsstand that shows himself standing in Times Square with his hands up and yelling, "Yatta," meaning "I did it," an incredibly accurate depiction of Hiro's arrival in New York. He attempts to pay in Japanese yen and runs off with the comic book. Hiro then discovers that the story includes what has already happened between himself and Ando, and his discovery of his abilities. Hiro decides to find the artist and writer, Isaac Mendez, by visiting his loft. Hiro visits Isaac's loft, discovering the artist's dead body, partially decapitated with the brain removed. Hiro is arrested by the police, and during the interrogation discovers he has traveled not only through space, but through time as well. It was October 2 when he left Tokyo, and he arrived in New York November 8. Just as Hiro discovers this, he witnesses a cataclysmic explosion. Before the blast reaches him, Hiro returns to the train he was on at the moment he left Tokyo, still holding the comic he picked up in the future. After going to the future, Hiro decides that he must save the world by preventing the explosion. Hiro then persuades Ando that his powers are genuine by saving a young girl from an oncoming car as predicted by the comic book from the future. They take a plane to Los Angeles, but go the rest of the way by car, because that is what the comic book says they do. Hiro and Ando then have several misadventures in Las Vegas, starting when Ando decides to hit the casinos. Ando convinces Hiro to use his powers to cheat, stopping time to give Ando winning hands in poker games. The two make a lot of money, but are later thrown out of the casino and then beaten up by a player they had cheated. After an argument, Hiro and Ando go their own separate ways. Hiro ends up in a diner near Las Vegas where he sees Nathan Petrelli land after escaping from Noah Bennett and the Haitian. After Nathan enters the diner, Hiro briefly talks with the man, and Nathan decides. Their attempts to call Isaac Mendez are finally successful, as Peter Petrelli answers the phone, relaying a message from Hiro's future self, and tells them save the cheerleader, save the world, and to come to New York City. However, the pair are detained further when the same player they cheated earlier forces them to play a poker game to make money to repay what they gained before. Ando and Hiro manage to escape shortly before the other players are slaughtered by Jessica Sanders. Hiro is crestfallen that he is unable to prevent their deaths, but is comforted by Ando, who claims Hiro is still beginning his journey to become a true hero. Hiro exercises his power as a hero again when he and Ando run across D.L. Hawkins and his son, Mika, at the scene of a burning car wreck with a passenger trapped inside. As D.L. frees the passenger, the vehicle explodes and Hiro freezes time to save them. Hiro complains about not having super strength when he is forced to drag the pair away from the explosion. After he unfreezes time, he shows the future edition of Ninth Wonders to Mika and speaks to him in English about his space-time manipulation powers. Continuing their journey to New York, Hiro and Ando stop at a diner in Texas and meet a waitress named Charlie, who recently developed powers of her own. As Hiro talks to Charlie, who finds him to be sweet, Siller watches them talk. Charlie is later found murdered in the diner's storeroom, with her brain removed, just as Hiro had found Isaac's body in New York. Not wanting to fail to save someone like he did in Las Vegas, Hiro goes back in time in an attempt to prevent her murder, promising Ando that he'll return in 5 seconds. Hiro's attempt to teleport to the day before Charlie's death goes awry, landing him 6 months in the past on the day of Charlie's birthday. Though he considers another time travel attempt, the possibility of being eaten by a dinosaur dissuades him. Hiro tries to warn Charlie and protect her from the very bad man, but ends up forming a close relationship with her after his attempts to convince her fail. Eventually, he asks her to come with him to Japan. As the date of their departure gets closer, Charlie reveals that she has a blood clot in her brain and will die no matter what. She says she was going to give up before Hiro came, and that she has fallen in love with him. Just as they are about to kiss, Hiro inadvertently teleports to Japan sometime after he and Ando had left for the United States. Unable to return via his own powers, he is forced to make his way back to the diner through normal means. Ando, happy to see Hiro again, assumes Hiro used his powers, not least because Hiro now appears in a photograph on the diner's wall taken with Charlie 6 months previously and was successful. But Hiro explains that he failed and made his way back through public transportation. After this incident, Hiro's powers appear to weaken. The novel Heroes, Saving Charlie expands and changes the events of the history. Hiro's love story with Charlie is expanded, as is her own role in foretelling her demise. They dated and fell in love during the months Hiro teleported back to, and eventually he told her that her memory was a power like his own. He did convince her to go to Japan with him, and they ended up in the same bar where Hiro has first told Ando his mission was to save the cheerleader and save the world. Charlie realized Hiro lied to her. He had told her his mission. In fallout, Hiro and Ando find their way to Claire's high school, but arrive after Siller's attack and believe her to have already been killed. Ando tries to be optimistic about the situation, claiming that Save the Cheerleader, Save the World is just a progression of events, Save the Cheerleader, and then Save the World, and not a conditional statement. Hiro doesn't accept the claim, believing that he would have meant it as a conditional statement. While thinking about their next move, Hiro is called by Isaac Mendez, who arranges a meeting with them in Texas. Once they meet, Hiro shows Isaac the future Ninth Wonders comic, much to the artist's surprise, then asks him to paint the future. At first, Isaac isn't convinced he can do so without drugs, but once he realizes that some of his rough sketches depict Hiro traveling back to save Charlie, he tries again. Hiro recommends that Isaac concentrate, using the same face he makes when activating his own powers, and Isaac manages to activate his power successfully. Isaac's painting depicts Hiro brandishing a sword while encountering a carnivorous, theropod dinosaur, seemingly confirming Hiro's earlier fears. Hiro remarks, "I really need to find that sword." 2 weeks later, at the beginning of Godsend, Hiro and Ando go to the Museum of Natural History. They find it in a glass case on the back of an ancient warrior, Takizo Kensei. On the hilt of the sword is the symbol that appears in various points throughout the series. Hiro recalls a story his father told him of Kensei and how the sword was believed to have benefited him. He decides to steal the sword, believing it will help him control his powers. While doing so, he brandishes it against a model dinosaur in the museum, mimicking the picture Isaac had drawn earlier. However, the museum's version of the sword is only a wooden replica made by the Linderman Group. He returns to Isaac's loft, where he meets Simone DeVoe. Hiro also happily re-encounters Nathan, whom he addresses as Flying Man. After introductions and brief discussions, Simone recommends Hiro go back to Las Vegas with the dinosaur painting and see Mr. Linderman, an avid collector of Isaac's paintings. In the fix, Hiro and Ando are chased by unknown men. Eventually, they are captured by the men, and Hiro is told that the men work for someone truly powerful. Hiro and Ando are then told to stop their quest. Hiro declines, even after being offered first-class plane tickets back to Japan. The men state their boss won't be happy and bring the two to him. Hiro then realizes the men work for his father, Kaito. In distractions, Hiro's father tries to convince him to go back to Tokyo, admitting that it was a bad idea to start him off at the bottom and offering him a job as executive vice president of the company. After Hiro's initial refusal, his father rips up Isaac's painting. Kimiko, Hiro's sister, admits to him that, though his father is too proud to admit it, the company has gone through hard times. Ando reminds him that his powers are declining, and it might not be a bad idea. Hiro eventually convinces his father that his sister is a better candidate to take over the company. Mr. Nakamura then lets Hiro continue with the mission. In Run, Hiro and Ando are again sidetracked by a weeping Las Vegas showgirl named Hope. Hiro and Ando get separated while trying to retrieve a bag for Hope. Hiro is locked in a closet by Hope, then later freed by a gaming commission agent who is looking for her. After watching Ando get shot during a firefight between the agent and Hope in Unexpected, Hiro feels his mission is too dangerous to bring Ando any further. Hiro defeats Hope by unexpectedly using his powers to reverse the bullet in time 1 second, sending it back into the gun, disarming Hope. She and the agent are arrested, but since Hiro had his eyes closed, he doesn't realize he used his powers, which haven't been working well lately. He leaves the Versa with Ando and boards a bus alone, greeted by comic icon Stan Lee playing the bus driver. In Parasite, Hiro tries to enter Linderman's casino, but becomes aware that he has been red flagged and is not to enter the casino. As Nathan Petrelli enters the casino to meet with Linderman, he uses his influence to help Hiro get inside. Hiro delivers the painting to Mr. Linderman's vault, where the vault curator accepts it. While the curator is in another room, Hiro locates the sword and steals it, with the help of Ando, disguised as a security guard. Hiro teleports them both out of the building to escape the other security guards, but they find themselves on top of the DeVoe building, in a post-apocalyptic New York 5 years after the explosion. In 7%, Hiro decides to learn as much as he can about the future to know what went wrong with his attempts to stop the bomb. He and Ando enter Isaac's apartment, but find it netted with newspaper articles suspended on strings, each article relating to the explosion and even the heroes themselves. Just then, Hiro and Ando hear a sound, and Hiro takes out his sword to confront whoever it is, but is shocked when he comes face to face with his future self. In 5 years gone, Hiro learns from his future self that the bomb still went off. The younger Hiro, in turn, reveals to his future self that the present-day Claire was rescued and Siller got caught, but Siller himself wasn't killed yet. This gives future Hiro hope, but before they can do anything about it, Matt Parkman and his Homeland Security team break into Isaac's loft and begin a raid. Ando and future Hiro manage to escape. Hiro is brutally interrogated by Matt, who doesn't believe he is telling the truth about time traveling. Mohinder Shorsh is called in to investigate Isaac's loft, where he is convinced about Hiro's story, but fails to convince the president, Nathan Petrelli, who is in fact Siller in disguise. The president orders Mohinder to kill present-day Hiro, but Mohinder finds he can't bring himself to do it. In the meantime, Ando and future Hiro enlist the aid of future Peter Petrelli, and they break into the building present Hiro is captured in. They defeat all the guards and, with the aid of Mohinder, manage to rescue Hiro. Unfortunately, before Hiro and Ando manage to travel back to their time, future Hiro is shot by Matt Parkman, who is in turn stopped by Peter, who uses telekinesis to close the door on Parkman. Hiro is shocked to see his future self die, but when Ando confides, he believes in Hiro now and shows him a copy of the Ninth Wonders comic book in which Hiro stabs Siller with his sword. Hiro gets his confidence back and travels back to the time from which they came. In the hard part, upon their return to the present timeline, Hiro proudly vows to New York City that he'll do his best to save it. However, he does realize it will be the hard part of his destiny. Hiro and Ando return to Isaac's loft, hoping to fill in the gaps of the futuristic comic book. However, they arrive to find that Isaac has been killed by Siller. When Hiro and Ando hear Siller in the bathroom, they hide behind a painting. Siller hears their heartbeats and uncovers their hiding spot. However, Hiro teleports Ando and himself to safety before they are found. Hiro and Ando continue to follow Siller and watch him meet with his mother, attempting to reconcile with her. After Siller's mother is accidentally killed, Hiro stops time and approaches Siller, sword drawn. However, as he swings, time resumes and Siller grabs Hiro's sword. Siller begins to freeze the sword, and as Hiro teleports to safety, with Ando it breaks in two. In Landslide, after Ando looks in the yellow pages for someone who can repair the sword, he finds an ad bearing the helix symbol seen throughout the series. Upon arriving, they encounter Hiro's father Kaito, who tells Hiro that he is worthy of the family destiny. He also trains Hiro to fight and kill with a sword. When Hiro is done training, he and Kaito discover that Ando, thinking that Kaito had convinced Hiro to return to Japan, bought a Nagamaki and has left to confront Siller alone. In How to Stop an Exploding Man, Hiro teleports to Isaac's loft to find Ando, about to be killed by Siller, but manages to teleport them both out of danger and back to Japan. Hiro switches weapons with Ando, claiming that it is not the sword. It is the man. This man is ready. Upon returning, he impales Siller with the Nagamaki. Siller uses the last of his strength to send fling Hiro toward a building, forcing Hiro to teleport to save himself. In doing so, however, he sends himself 3 centuries into the past to Kyoto, Japan circa 1671. Upon collecting himself, he finds himself caught in the middle of a battle between a small group of samurai about to attack a figure on the horizon, who appears to be Kensei himself. Before the battle begins, however, an eclipse shadows the scene. Generations. In 4 months later, the premiere episode of Season 2, Hiro freezes time as the archers from the battle scene at the end of How to Stop an Exploding Man are about to kill him. He then teleports who he believes to be Takizo, Kensei, away from the battle and into a small forest. There, he learns that the man is a decoy, and that the real Kensei, an Englishman in samurai armor, had been hiding in a tree in order to snipe the enemy with a crossbow. After some conversation, Hiro realizes that by interfering in the battle, he has changed the past, and Atsu is raised. The swordsmith's daughter, a woman named Yiko, who Kensei was supposed to wed according to the legend, grows angry at Kensei and takes back her father's sword given as payment, saying that she will go fight the bandits herself. Kensei reacts to this with general apathy. In Lizards, Hiro impersonates Kensei by donning his armor in order to make sure the bandits don't kill Yiko, and to prove to her that Kensei is a hero. Scaring off the bandits using his powers, Hiro as Kensei wins the heart of Yiko. Encountering the real Kensei afterwards, Hiro manages to convince him to help Yiko rescue her father. However, as they are about to leave, the bandits return and fire arrows at Kensei, seemingly killing him. However, once the arrows are removed, Kensei regenerates in a fashion similar to Claire Bennett. With Kensei's newly discovered power, Hiro realizes how he became the hero of legend. Since Kensei isn't quite ready to accept his destiny, Hiro forces him to play out another of his legends, this one the retrieval of the Fire Scroll from 90 Angry Ronin. The task convinces Kensei to take up his own mantle, and he likens Hiro to his conscience, except he pays attention to Hiro. Believing his task to be done, Hiro initially decides to return to his own time, but during the attempt suddenly stops and returns to Kensei. Hiro, determined to preserve the timeline, decides to remain in feudal Japan until Kensei defeats Whitebeard and saves Japan. They locate Whitebeard's army camp, and Hiro helps Kensei rescue Yiko's father. However, in a moment of weakness, Hiro gives in to his own desires and confesses his love to Yiko, and they kiss, unaware that Kensei is watching them. Hiro tries to apologize, but Kensei reverts to his old ways and knocks Hiro unconscious and turns him, Yiko, and her father over to Whitebeard's soldiers. According to Hiro's note to Ando, this causes a currently unknown alteration to the timeline. Hiro is kept prisoner in Whitebeard's camp, where they use opium to dull his senses, preventing him from using his powers. Yiko manages to free herself from her shackles and removes the opium. Hiro is able to focus just enough to teleport them to safety. Later, Hiro returns to Whitebeard's camp to destroy the guns. Before he can set the gunpowder cache on fire, Kensei confronts him, and the two engage in a sword fight. Hiro tries to persuade Kensei to join him to stop Whitebeard, but Kensei refuses and vows to Hiro that as long as he lives, he will destroy everything he holds dear. Hiro teleports out right before the guns explode. He meets Yiko under the cherry blossoms one last time and tells her the final tale in the legend of Kensei, where he is forced to cut his heart out. Yiko vows that as long as she has a breath in her body, she will tell his story as the story of Takizo Kensei. They share a final kiss, and Hiro teleports out, leaving Yiko alone under the cherry blossoms. Hiro then teleports back to the present day, effectively fulfilling the final task by leaving Yiko behind, and he learns from Ando that his father has been killed. Hiro attempts to go back and prevent his death in cautionary tales, but his father convinces him that they cannot play God with their gifts. Hiro accepts this advice but uses the opportunity to learn that Kensei was the one responsible for murdering his father. In Truth and Consequences, Hiro is able to learn more about Kensei and his new name, Adam Monroe. He travels back in time to 1977 and learns that Adam was imprisoned by his father after he almost releases a virus that could kill everything. He learns that the virus will be kept in the Primatich facility in Odessa, Texas. Determined to avenge his father's murder, he teleports to the facility with his sword and stops time. There, he sees Peter Petrelli for the first time since How to Stop an Exploding Man. Hiro declares his intentions to Peter, but Peter refuses to let Hiro harm Adam. Peter's hand crackles with electricity as Hiro lets out a battle cry and charges with his sword drawn. In powerless, Hiro confronts Peter, but is knocked unconscious. Later, he is reunited with Nathan Petrelli and Matt Parkman, who are there to stop Peter and Adam from getting the virus. Hiro teleports into the vault and confronts Adam for the first time since the Tent and Whitebeard's camp. Hiro tells Adam he should not have let Adam live long ago, then grabs Adam and teleports him away. Hiro later reveals to Ando that Adam will not hurt anyone ever again. The scene cuts to Adam, locked in a casket, buried alive in a Japanese cemetery. Villains. Fugitives. Hiro, powerless, is back in Japan with Ando. He bought an abandoned fire station from the city as their headquarters. After injecting him with a GPS device and revealing the Ando cycle, Ando tells Hiro that he feels that he's trying to live through him since he is currently powerless. After Hiro denies this, Ando leaves frustrated. Later, while talking to Ando on the phone, Hiro is captured by Nathan's agents. Then Hiro is awakened by Claire on a plane with other captured people with abilities. Due to a battle with Peter and the soldiers on it, the plane crashes with everyone inside. Hiro survives and runs for his life together with Mohinder Shursh and Matt Parkman. Meanwhile, Ando is getting worried and tries to get to Arkansas where the plane crashed. He is visited by Daphne, who worries about the kidnapped Matt and runs to Arkansas together with Ando. They are quickly reunited, but Daphne gets shot by Hunter's agents. Hiro, Ando, Matt and Mohinder escape again from the soldiers and are also reunited with Peter Petrelli. Hiro gets handed some drawings of Matt which reveal that he and Ando are to go to India. On the dawning stand Hiro, an unknown blonde girl and a man. Hiro believes he must find a sword there so he can regain his lost powers. In Building 26, he and Ando travel to India and realize that the blonde girl is a future bride who doesn't want to get married but accepts it because of her grandfather's wishes. Ando convinces the bride to stop the wedding, which upsets Hiro because he is no longer the hero on a quest. While on the bride's coffee house, Ando gets kidnapped by the groom and will kill him if the wedding is not celebrated. During the wedding, Hiro stops it and defends the bride with a knife, thus fulfilling Matt's painting as he realizes that he doesn't need powers to be a hero. The wedding is off, and while he and Ando are reunited in the coffee house, they receive a message from Rebel telling them that they must save Matt Parkman. As seen in Shades of Grey, Hiro and Ando are directed to Los Angeles, where they find that the Matt Parkman Rebel was referring to was only a baby also named Matt Parkman. In Cold Snap, Hiro and Ando discover that this is actually the son of the Matt Parkman they know. They also discover the baby possesses the ability to touch things and make them go. When armed men break into baby Matt's house, Hiro discovers that the baby also is able to restart his powers, at least in part. After the baby touched Hiro, he is able to once again manipulate time, though he is still unable to bend space and teleport. After freezing time, Hiro takes baby Matt and the frozen Ando, whom he puts in a wheelbarrow, and walks 12 miles to a bus station. After restarting time, Hiro remarks to Ando, "Time is once again on our side." In turn and face the strange after escaping, Hiro and Ando, with baby Matt in tow, are in the way to find Matt Sr. But Matt Jr. keeps inactivating any vehicle they are on due to the noise they make, until Ando comes with a funny face to entertain the baby, and Hiro convinces him to keep it so the cube can go. They finally manage to track down Matt Sr., who has gone to confront Danko. Hiro freezes time just as Danko fires his gun at Matt and drags Matt out of the apartment. Hiro then unites Matt with the son he didn't No, he had, giving Matt a reason to live again. In I Am Siller, Hiro and Ando try to convince Matt to join them bringing down Building 26, but he refuses because he has a son now to look for, and he must retrieve Junior to his mother in lab. Later, they arrive Reed Street Laboratory to set up a trap for HLS agents, using Ando as bait, although he refuses as Hiro manages to not freeze him, telling him he is a hero too. But Hiro still keeps his plan going on, unfreezing the agents so they can take down Ando, and then freezing everybody again so he can take an agent. Once in motion, Hiro manages to awaken Ando so he can be ready for action, but when he unfreezes time, an agent realizes Hiro is not one of them, and Ando shoots a big blast of red lightning affecting everyone and saving Hiro. As Plan B, they use the GPS signal of the agents to track the place, and once they are ready to fight, Hiro tries to freeze time, but instead he receives a strong headache and nosebleed as they realize he can't use his ability anymore. In an invisible thread, Hiro recovers from his headache and nosebleed and insists on continuing with the plan despite the danger. He stops time and he and Ando infiltrate Building 26 to free the trapped prisoners. They find and free Danko and Noah and find the drug-devolved humans, but Hiro's ear starts bleeding and he clearly hides the fact that he is in pain. The two free them and replace them with all of the members of the Building 26 unit, and Hiro then unfreezes time and he and Ando show the freed prisoners the way out. Mohinder checks Hiro out and determines that Hiro's body is rejecting his powers and he can't risk freezing time anymore. Hiro freezes time again to save Noah Bennett from being tranquilized by Danko and tranquilizes Danko, but faints afterwards and is apparently taken to a hospital. Later, and apparently fully recovered, though still suffering from headaches, Hiro and Ando witness the burning of Siller's really James Martin body, and Hiro tells Ando it is time for them to return home to Tokyo. Redemption. Hiro's Reborn. In Brave New World, Tommy owns a copy of Ninth Wonders, the issue #31, the cover of which features Ando and Hiro at Sam's Comics. In Under the Mask, in the lobby of Yamagato Tower, Harris disarms Miko and recognizes that her sword belongs to Hiro Nakamura. When Noah forces Norris to show him security footage of himself at the hospital on June 13, he sees that time keeps skipping back and forth in one room he was in. He assumes that the temporal anomaly was caused by Hiro. When Noah tells Quentin what he saw in the footage, Quentin comes to the same conclusion. In The Lion's Den, Noah Bennett asks Erica Kravitz about the true status of Hiro Nakamura. Erica claims that he died at the Odessa Peace Summit on June 13, 2014. Noah, however, does not believe her. In Game Over, Noah eventually gets Harris to lead him to a facility where Hiro is trapped in a video game. Noah and Ren learn that Miko Otomo can only release Hiro by sacrificing herself. Hiro is eventually rescued by Miko using the Kensei sword as a key. Hiro emerges from the video game in time to freeze time around Noah and save his life as he's about to be shot. Hiro greets Noah, who asks Hiro to take him back to June 13, 2014 to change history. Hiro is reluctant, but decides that Erica Kravitz used him to bend time to her own purposes when she imprisoned him, so he agrees. Hiro teleports away with Noah asking him not to step on any butterflies. At the Odessa summit, Hiro and Noah appear and walk towards the building. In June 13, Part 1, Hiro's past self is seen as CEO of Yamagato Industries. Having not time-traveled in years, Hiro refuses to aid Erica Kravitz's effort to send supplies to the future, and the man sent to convince him traps him in Everno, which allows Erica. Hiro is reported dead in the bombing to the man's shop. After the future Hiro brings them back to the summit, Noah explains the bombing to him. After Noah learns from Angela Petrelli that Claire is in the hospital, Hiro sends Noah to save Claire while he stops the bomb. Hiro tells Noah that this time you will save the cheerleader while he stops the bomb, referring to his future self's Save the Cheerleader, Save the World message. Hiro rescues Mohinder Shursh from Harris and takes on two Harris. Armed with two swords, Hiro faces off with the clones who tell him he can't defeat them on his own. Stating that he can but he needs to know what will happen if he does. Hiro freezes time and teleports away, appearing several times just feet away from the one before. Finally, Hiro sadly states too many butterflies and teleports away, unfreezing time. Returning to Noah just after he says goodbye to a dead Claire, Hiro informs him that it is impossible to change the bombing, as there are too many variables and any attempt to change the future will result in a worse one, as he discovered when he tried. Hiro and Noah attempt to return to their time, but are stopped when Phoebe Frady unleashes a massive cloud of darkness that drains Hiro's powers. Shortly afterward, Harris bombs the summit and Hiro and Noah stare at the rising smoke cloud in the distance in horror. Returning to Angela and Claire's children, Hiro insists that they can't change Claire's death or the bombing Azati's fate, and even he can't change fate. Angela concurs with this and tells them about the future apocalypse she foresaw and that one or both of Claire's children hold the key to saving the world. Noah realizes that the safest place for them is in the past, where they can grow up and gain their powers, while Erica will be looking for toddlers in the future, not teenagers. Hiro reluctantly agrees to take the children, Nathan and Melina, back to 1999 with Angela and tells Noah he will return shortly and not to change anything else. It is shown that Hiro left Nathan with the nurse who helped him feed the baby, and Clark and Nathan would grow up to be teleporter Tommy Clark. In June 13, Part 2, Hiro takes Angela, Nathan, and Melina back to 1999, but they land in Odessa rather than Geneva as planned. When Hiro attempts to transport them to Geneva, he discovers his power is gone, and Angela realizes that Nathan has power absorption abilities similar to Arthur and Peter. He took Claire's power, resulting in her death, and has now taken Hiro's power. Angela realizes they need to keep the children apart and takes Melina with her, leaving Hiro to raise Nathan himself. In the present, Noah tries to track down Hiro with the help of Molly Walker so he can return Noah to his own time. Molly is able to locate Hiro's power, but not Hiro himself. Arriving at a house in Odessa, Noah finds an older Hiro to his shock. Hiro has married Nurse and Clark from the hospital and raised Nathan as his own son. Hiro explains that Nathan has his powers now and can only keep one ability at a time. Hiro is angry that Noah tried to kill Erica Kravitz, and Harris shows up to attack. Nathan teleports Harris across the room, allowing Noah to kill him, and Noah has Nathan take him to see Angela. After Noah's return, Hiro guides Nathan through, returning Noah to the future, and spots more Harris arriving. Hiro orders Nathan to take in and Caspar. He says goodbye to him and gives Nathan the Ninth Wonders comic that set Hiro on his path to his destiny, hoping it can help Nathan do the same one day. After Nathan teleports away, Hiro draws two swords and charges the three Harris for a final stand. Nathan attempts to return to aid Hiro, forcing Caspar to erase his memory of all but and to protect him, leading to Nathan becoming Tommy Clark. In Sunday, Bloody Sunday, Tommy is finally told the truth about everything, including that he has Hiro's powers and Hiro was his stepfather. Without his memories, Tommy shows that he thinks himself a simple teleporter and is unaware of his being able to time travel or freeze time. However, he is able to relearn how to use these parts of his ability after it is revealed to be Hiro's. In Company Woman, Tommy takes into the future, and she reminds him that Hiro trained him all of his life to save the world, even though Tommy doesn't remember it, and tells Tommy that Hiro was always amazed by Tommy's powers and had stated that Tommy could do much more with them than Hiro ever could. However, and doesn't know what Hiro meant by that. She also reminds Tommy that according to Hiro, what they are seeing is only one possible future, which means he can still change it. When Tommy later considers going back in time, in Project Reborn, Tommy sees several memories of his life with Hiro, including Hiro introducing himself. Tommy is left emotional at seeing himself with Hiro, and after his escape from the Eternal Fortress, realizes he can split himself in two with Hiro's powers. Erica Kravitz tells Tommy that not even Hiro could do that, but Tommy tells her Hiro trained him for his whole life in using his powers, and he had an eternity in the Eternal Fortress to practice. Tommy later rescues Noah from being killed and shows him how 7 years in the past, Angela Petrelli determined that the only way for Tommy and Melina to save the world was to have a human conduit for their powers. However, such an action would be fatal for the conduit. Tommy explains that he tried to stop the HELE 1,000 times but couldn't, so instead he followed some advice Hiro once gave him about time travel and changing time, to follow the tiniest thread, the smallest butterfly, while trying to locate the key to changing events. In Tommy's case, that had led him to Noah, who agreed to sacrifice himself to allow his grandchildren to save the world. While explaining this, Tommy paraphrases future Hiro's message of save the cheerleader, save the world, by telling Noah save you, save the world. Alternate futures. Another Hiro Nakamura, this one claiming to be from the future, first appears in Collision. When he appears to Peter Petrelli in a subway, he freezes time in order to speak with Peter privately. He urges Peter to save the cheerleader, save the world, and to be the one we need, but doesn't elaborate for fear of causing a rift in the space-time continuum. He also mentions that Peter looks different without the scar. The future Hiro appears to be much more fit, confident, and experienced than his present self. He sports a soul patch and ponytail, no longer wears glasses, wears a black overcoat, carries a katana on his back, and speaks fluent idiomatically correct English. Future Hiro's fluent accent is in fact Masi Oka's real voice, deepened for dramatic effect. He is also much more serious, focused, and calm than the current-day Hiro, and his sense of humor appears to be diminished. The future Peter Petrelli speculates that it was Ando's death in the explosion that changed Hiro. He appears again in the episode 7% when he meets with present Hiro, and 5 Years Gone, which tells a side story about himself. Future Hiro also appears in the graphic novel Heroes #30 String Theory, in which he acts as a night watcher who watches over people with powers getting hunted down by normal, human police officers. In this issue, Hiro rescues a girl named Sparrow, and the two seem to know each other. He also explains a bit what happened in the future after the bomb went off. The issue ends with the final scene of 7%. Before 5 Years Gone takes place, in the graphic novel series Walls Parts 1 and 2, Hiro and Peter break other people with special abilities out of a prison, though Hiro and Peter aren't able to stop time because one of the others blocked the ability, though Hiro does draw his sword. In 5 Years Gone, the scene starts again with Hiro and Ando meeting Hiro's future self. He tells them how they aren't supposed to be there and asks why the future hasn't changed. Future Hiro learns that present-day Hiro has not had the chance to kill Siller yet. He decides that he must get present Hiro back to the past so that he can stop Siller, but before future Hiro can do so, Matt Parkman, his Homeland Security squad, and the Haitian raid the loft. Future Hiro and Ando are able to escape, but present-day Hiro is captured. Future Hiro begins recruiting people so that he can free present-day Hiro and goes off to Las Vegas to seek Peter's help. Ando and future Hiro encounter Nikki, who is in a relationship with Peter. Nikki tells them nothing about Peter, but when prompted, tells them that she knows that Mr. Bennett is in Texas, helping those with abilities to establish new identities and hide from the government. Once there, future Hiro asks Bennett for help, specifically requesting D.L. Hawkins, Candace Wilmer, and Molly Walker. While at first Bennett doesn't want to help, he agrees when he hears that they know Claire is alive. Future Hiro and Ando then begin talking about what happened to Ando in the future. Right when Hiro is about to tell Ando something important, he is shot with a taser by Matt. Before they are about to be captured, Peter comes and, by utilizing Hiro's power, is able to help them escape. With Peter's help, future Hiro and Ando are able to enter the building where present-day Hiro is being held and make it to him. Right after they free present-day Hiro, future Hiro tells them he will take them back to their time since present-day Hiro still doesn't have full control of his powers, but before he can do it he is shot and killed by Matt Parkman. Before future Hiro dies, he gives Ando Isaac's incomplete comic book. In an alternate future shown in the Second Coming, a future version of Hiro, while dressed the same as the aforementioned future version, has the same hairstyle as his present-day self and still wears glasses. The older Hiro argues with Ando, who attacks Hiro with an energy manipulation ability in Tokyo, just before an unknown force destroys the city. Powers and abilities. Hiro possessed the power to control the space-time continuum, giving him the power to manipulate the flow of time, travel through time, and teleport to any location at will until Arthur Petrelli took it away when he traveled back. Specific examples of temporal manipulation include slowing time relative to himself and rewinding time specific to certain objects, a clock, a train, and a gun in various episodes. As demonstrated by his encounters with Daphne, a woman with the power of enhanced speed, Hiro does not stop time completely. Hiro has shown the ability to teleport both himself and others in physical contact with himself, both through space and time. Although stressful events and practice have helped Hiro to develop his abilities, Hiro initially has trouble with the more complicated teleportation and time travel abilities. For example, when he teleported to New York City, he inadvertently traveled 5 weeks into the future as well. Although he was able to travel back to the same time and place from which he left, he was only able to do so when his life was in danger from a nuclear explosion. Later, when he attempted to save Charlie's life by traveling to the day before her death, Hiro accidentally traveled 6 months into the past. He also inadvertently teleported to present-day Japan from Texas just as he and Charlie were about to kiss and then could not teleport back, no matter how hard he tried. After the incident with Charlie, Hiro's powers began weakening, eventually becoming completely unusable, though he is able to inadvertently reverse time for a bullet by 1 second, saving himself and Ando, but unaware he did it. He seeks out Takizo, Kensei's sword, in the hope that it will focus his failing powers. After obtaining the sword, Hiro exhibits the ability to teleport other people along with himself, which he uses to rescue himself and Ando from an impending attack by casino guards in Parasite, though this too resulted in an inadvertent trip 5 years into the future, after the explosion had occurred. The episode 5 Years Gone marks his first successful use of teleportation and time travel. By the hard part, Hiro has improved his skill in teleportation, as he uses it twice without traveling any discernible distance through time. His father attributes this to a matter of confidence rather than any effect caused by the sword. In addition to his power over time, Hiro is skilled with a katana, having been trained by his father. In its coming and the eclipse, Hiro is mentally reverted into a 10-year-old, but still possesses his powers. After Ando teaches him how to use them again, Hiro shows great control over them even in his young mental state, being able to stop time with ease and using it to play tricks, teleport himself and others, and time travel 16 years into the past with Claire Bennett. In Our Father, Hiro's abilities are stolen by Arthur Petrelli, rendering him a normal human. In the episode Cold Snap, Hiro regains some of his ability when the son of Matt Parkman, whom he dubs Toddler Touch and Go, touches him and turns his ability on. At the moment, Hiro has regained the ability to stop and restart time, but is still unable to teleport or travel through time. In I Am Siller, Hiro manages to regain more of his abilities from Parkman's son, allowing him to make Ando unaffected by his time freezing. However, problems have now arisen. When Hiro and Ando prepare to infiltrate Building 26, Hiro's powers falter, and he instead receives a blistering headache and a nosebleed. After the two rescue all of the evolved humans, Mohinder states that for some reason Hiro's body is now rejecting his powers, and he can't risk freezing time again. Hiro does it one more time to save Noah Bennett from Danko, but it proves to be too much of a strain on him and causes him to pass out. Hiro appears to regain the full extent of his abilities in the fourth season episode Orientation. After focusing on a photograph of himself, Ando, and his sister Kimiko taken at the Sullivan Bros Carnival 14 years ago, he inadvertently travels there. By doing so, he used both his time-traveling and teleportation abilities. He seems to have little control over his power. He seems to travel through time when he's thinking of something from the past. As of hysterical blindness, Hiro has the ability to teleport back. However, like his ability to time travel, his first teleportation seemed accidental and instinctual. It took him from Yamagato to Peter Petrelli's apartment. He then collapsed from presumably the strain the teleport put on him in his condition. His time-stopping ability, if he uses it too much, exhausts Hiro and causes him pain. As of tabula rasa, Hiro is beginning to have more control over his power. An unfortunate side effect of this ability is the strain it puts on the body can cause inoperable tumors. As of Once Upon a Time in Texas and Brothers Keeper, Hiro is regaining control over the other aspects of his ability, but he lacks perfect control. When Samuel provoked him, Hiro managed to teleport them both to Samuel's carnival, but later he was unsure if he could time travel 8 weeks. Hiro managed to perform this task, but it took him 2 tries to get it right, as he said the first time took him 10 minutes too late. The time travel caused him to have a minor nosebleed, but besides that he seemed to suffer no ill effects. He later displays just teleportation, teleporting Mohinder to Florida where he checks him into a mental hospital under a fake name in order to keep him out of sight for 8 weeks in order to preserve the timeline. In Thanksgiving, Lydia has him take her back 8 weeks into the past to see Joseph Sullivan's death. He teleports them easily, but he indicates Lydia was responsible for it, not him, but this is unclear. In the past, he has trouble teleporting them back due to his lack of full control and probably the stress of the situation. However, with Lydia's help, he manages to bring them both back to the present. In Close to You, Hiro lacks the ability to properly use his powers due to his mind being messed up, but once Ando restores his mind, Hiro is instantly able to teleport at will with Mohinder Shorsh and Ando, taking them both to Noah Bennett's apartment. Hiro shows no trouble teleporting at will this time and takes more than one person with him, something he hasn't done since before he lost his powers. In Brave New World, Hiro tests his powers out after his brain tumor is removed and learns that removing the brain tumor has restored full control over his powers. Hiro is easily able to teleport himself and Endo to Central Park, where the carnival is with no issues. There, Hiro is asked to teleport over a dozen people away from the carnival. Hiro has everyone hold hands and manages to succeed in teleporting everyone thanks to Ando supercharging his powers, which give him the boost to his powers he needs to teleport such a large group of people. In Heroes Reborn, Hiro's powers have evolved as has his understanding of them. Hiro repeatedly states that he can't change fated events and attempts to do so could result in worse futures. When Hiro is trapped in Everno, Erica Kravitz is able to harness Hiro's powers to send supplies to the future when even Hiro is not there to personally use the power. Before being trapped in the game, Hiro states that he hasn't time traveled in years. After being rescued from Everno, Hiro is able to freeze time around Noah Bennett without even being fully out of the game. He is also able to keep Noah out of the freeze without touching him as he previously needed. After traveling back to the Odessa Peace Summit, Hiro is apparently able to change the future and then reverse the changes as he indicates that he saw what would come of his attempts to change things. In Project Reborn, Erica Kravitz stated that Hiro was unable to split himself in two, though Tommy Clark displayed this ability while using Hiro's powers. In the same episode, Tommy revealed some advice Hiro gave him about changing time. that the best way to do it is to search for the tiniest thread, the smallest butterfly, and doing so will lead to the key to changing events, something Hiro presumably learned on his own time travels. Time alterations. Hiro's trips have given Hiro his own unique timeline, which is reflected in some of Isaac Mendes's paintings of Hiro. Along with the existence of an alternate future version of himself, Hiro has come across or induced a few time paradoxes or alterations in the series. In One Giant Leap, Hiro travels with Ando to the United States even though Ando was still in Japan when he had previously traveled to the future New York City. When directly questioned about this by Ando, Hiro says they are changing the future. Between the episodes 7 Minutes to Midnight and 6 Months Ago, Hiro traveled 6 months into the past in Texas. There, he changed history again by forming a close relationship with Charlie in the past. This change was most noted by a picture which had originally shown only Charlie at her birthday party, now showing both her and Hiro. At one point, Hiro accidentally gave himself a phone call from Texas to Japan while trying to contact Ando, though he immediately hangs up after he realizes it was the Hiro in Japan who had answered, afraid of coming into contact with his past self. In 7 Minutes to Midnight, Charlie said that someone had given her a Japanese phrase book on her birthday. In 6 Months Ago, it is Hiro who gives her the phrase book. Ironically, in general, the future shown in Don't Look Back seems to be even more certain, as changes that have been or intended to have been made futile. In 6 Months Ago, Hiro accidentally jumps back in time 6 months to prevent Charlie from dying, only to find out that she has a blood clot in her brain and will die anyway. In Unexpected, Isaac received a gun from Mr. Bennett, the same gun Hiro found in Isaac's apartment. As of 7%, Siller has killed Isaac in a similar manner to his original death. In String Theory, it is revealed that future Hiro tells Peter to save the cheerleader so that the failed attempt to stop Siller from exploding might prove successful. However, the future has proven itself to not be entirely certain, as the characters were able to stop the explosion from destroying New York City in How to Stop an Exploding Man. Starting at the end of Season 1 and through much of Season 2, Hiro was in 1671 feudal Japan. There he becomes personally entwined in the history and events surrounding the warrior Takizo Kensei. Recognizing the man is not as history portrays him, Hiro works to help Takizo fulfill his destiny. This results in Hiro personally influencing many major events. In Lizards, Hiro impersonates Takizo and uses his powers to disarm 11 bandits, the Battle of 12 Swords, and gains the gratitude and admiration of Yiko, the swordsmith's daughter. In Kindred, Hiro forces Takizo to face 90 angry Ronin in order to retrieve the Fire Scroll, fulfilling another part of Takizo's legend. In The Line, Hiro helps Takizo rescue Yiko's father and discovers how Takizo will save Japan, destroying the illegal firearms that Whitebeard's army are planning to use to overthrow the emperor. However, Hiro gives into his own desire for Yiko, causing Takizo to side with Whitebeard. Hiro destroys the guns by himself. Yiko later asserts that Hiro is the person the Takizo Kensei legends are about and vows to spread the legends under that name. To fulfill the final part of the legend, cutting out his own heart, he leaves Yiko behind and returns to the present. In Our Father and Jewel, Hiro travels back in time with Claire, Bennett 16 years in an attempt to change the past. There the two successfully change some things. Claire prevents her father from answering a call that would have led to her becoming the catalyst, and Hiro, after his mother heals his mind, has her transfer the catalyst to him to protect it. Unfortunately, Arthur Petrelli still ends up with the catalyst as he travels back in time too and steals it and Hiro's powers from Hiro before sending Claire back to the present, trapping Hiro in the past. Hiro tries to destroy the formula in the past, but only manages to rip it in half like it originally was in the present before Daphne and Ando rescue him before he does so and before Kaito kills him. In Redemption, Hiro has regained the ability to time travel and has decided to use it to right mistakes. This results in apparently minor changes to the timeline. In Jump, Push, Pull, Hiro, after regaining his ability to time travel and accidentally 14 years, stops Ando from spilling a slushie on his sister Kimiko. Returning to the present, Hiro discovers that instead of Kimiko hating Ando since that night, they've been madly in love and start to have wedding plans in acceptance. In acceptance, after a coworker commits suicide, Hiro goes back multiple times to change him getting fired, but it just happens a different way each time. Hiro finally changes things by sitting down and talking to the man before he kills himself and convincing him that it's not worth it. In Once Upon a Time in Texas, Hiro travels back 3 years in order to save Charlie from death at Siller's hands. He makes a deal with Siller to tell him about his future in exchange for Siller's help in healing Charlie's aneurysm. Hiro was ready to begin a new life with Charlie before Samuel uses one of his family members' powers to trap Charlie somewhere in time, which he uses in order to manipulate Hiro into fixing a few of Samuel's indiscretions. The information that Hiro provides to Siller may alter the timeline further in future episodes, although there was no sign of an alteration upon Hiro's return to the present at the end of the episode. In order to keep history in line as much as possible, as well, Hiro sends his own self back in time 6 months in order for him to fall in love with Charlie and tell past Ando to stay, explaining what past Hiro is doing. The only change that seems to be displayed is that, when Siller and Matt talk at the diner, he says he only tried to kill a waitress there. Siller is also now worried about dying alone due to what Hiro has told him and didn't kill Samuel for his power and took Lydia's without killing later. Siller also ends up repenting and turning good ultimately as a result. Charlie is kidnapped by Samuel and Arnold and sent to Milwaukee on January 26, 1944, where she ends up living a long life and meets up with Hiro again as an old woman in the present. Hiro offers to head to that date and place and return her to her own time, but she chooses not to as she lived a good life and has a family that would never exist if he did that. In Brother's Keeper, Hiro manages to time travel back 8 weeks to retrieve a film from Mohinder Church for Samuel in order to get Charlie back. His attempt works on the second try. He replaces the film with a fake, so Mohinder believes he burned the real one, with the first try 10 minutes too late, showing him Mohinder's fate. Hiro uses the opportunity to change that as well, putting a Kevlar vest on Mohinder, protecting him from Samuel's attack and making it appear that he died when he really didn't. He then requests Mohinder disappear for 8 weeks to keep the timeline on track as much as possible and allow Hiro to get Charlie back, but Mohinder refuses, wanting to stop Samuel, so Hiro teleports him to Florida, where he checks him into a mental hospital under a fake name so he's out of the way. In the present, Samuel displays no knowledge of Mohinder's survival. In the present, Hiro and Ando rescue Mohinder from the hospital after Hiro, even in a severely addled state, remembers Mohinder is there. In Thanksgiving, Hiro and Lydia teleport 8 weeks into the past in order to witness Joseph's death. They learn that Samuel killed him, but just observe and don't interfere in the event. However, Lydia makes noise, and while Hiro and Lydia manage to teleport away, in the present it makes Samuel suspicious of Lydia, leading to the expulsion of Edgar from the carnival and Edgar nearly being killed before Hiro saves him. In Heroes Reborn, Hiro had stopped using his time travel powers following the end of Redemption, but resumes use of them after being rescued from Everno. In Game Over and June 13 Part 1, Hiro takes Noah Bennett back in time a year to the Odessa Peace Summit on June 13, 2014 in an attempt to stop the bombing of the summit and save Claire Bennett's life. Though Hiro finds the bomber, he experiments with what will happen if he tries to stop the bombing. It is indicated that he experienced multiple possible futures trying this, as he tells Noah that if he changes this event, the futures that will result will be even worse. Hiro is unable to safely change the bombing and tells Noah it is impossible. He is also unable to save Claire's life for the same reason. Instead, at Noah's request, Hiro takes Claire's children Nathan and Melina back to 1999 to protect them so they will grow up and be ready for their destiny of saving the world while also protecting them from Erica Kravitz. This is shown to not be a change to the timeline, but rather something that was apparently destined to happen as Noah had his memory of the day erased to protect the children from Erica Kravitz and Nathan, now known as Tommy Clark, and Melina. Well, in Sunday, Bloody Sunday, it is revealed that Hiro was partially responsible for minor changes to the timeline during his trip with Noah. Noah altered a few things that resulted in the Haitian and Quentin still being alive, but also turned Quentin from good to evil. Reception. Yu-Gi-Oh! Networks listed Hiro as one of their best heroes of all time. The character has had a mixed reception. Million French pop singer Aya Nakamura adapted her stage name from the character. References